Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Our Stony Acres. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about what we can be planting now in early August for fall and winter harvest, okay? And so we're going to be covering several different things, including what we can be planting directly in the ground, what we can be planting in containers, and what we can be planting indoors to be transplanting out a little bit later on in the season, okay? Now this video is designed for those of you that live in zones 5 through 7. Now before we get started, I did want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you get noticed every time we release new videos. And make sure that you go over and follow us on Instagram. We've got a growing group over there, and I'm doing a lot of fun stuff trying to be out in the garden every day, showing you guys what's happening in the garden. And so a lot of fun stuff there. I'd love it if you would go over and follow us on Instagram, and there's a link down in the description that you can do that with. The other thing that I wanted to do today is to thank our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Smart Pots, and we're going to be showing you some Smart Pots a little bit later on in the video and doing some planting in some Smart Pots for our fall and winter garden. So make sure you check that out as well. The first thing that I want to talk about today is what we can actually be planting directly in the garden and in the ground out in our garden. Now, a lot of this is going to be limited to your space, and so let me do a quick cutaway video of my garden. And you can see that here in early August, it's still pretty packed full of produce. And so I don't have a lot of space. I've got this one little spot here that's about a 12-foot long bed that is empty right now. And I've been kind of holding out planting there because that's where we're going to be planting my spinach today. But I don't have a lot of space, so it may be different for you. If you've got some space available, if crops have already started to come out, then everything that I talk about today, including the container and the planting indoor stuff, could actually be planted directly out in your garden right now in early August for fall crops. But if you don't have the space yet, then we're also going to talk about using containers and planting indoors so that when that space frees up in a little while, you will have some crops ready to go out that will have enough progress made in order for you to get a decent harvest, okay? Now, your target for your actual planting dates is somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost, okay? Whether you're planting in the ground, in containers, or starting seedlings indoors, everything that I talk about today, that's kind of your target. So figure out when your first frost date is, and then count back 8 weeks, and that's when you're going to start planting all of these crops. Let's talk about some of the things that absolutely have to be planted in the ground, okay? And these are things that I'm going to be planting in the ground this weekend in my garden so that we get a good start, okay? First would be any root crops, okay? So root crops don't transplant well. So we're not going to be starting carrots or beets or turnips indoors to be transplanted out later. That just doesn't work. And so if you want to have beets, carrots, turnips, parsnips, anything like that in the fall, you're going to need to find space in your garden and plant directly in the ground in your garden. And so we're going to be putting some carrots in. I'm going to be doing some beets this weekend and probably a few turnips as well. We're not huge turnip fans, but I'm going to put a few in just because we like to have a few during the fall season. So all of those are going to go directly in the ground now so that we can get a good start and that those will be ready to harvest before the really cold weather sets in and the sunlight starts to go away. A couple of other crops that we are actually going to be planting directly in the ground this weekend would include spinach and Swiss chard. Now, both of those you could plant indoors if you wanted, but they don't transplant really well because they have those long tap roots, and so they would prefer to be actually planted directly in the ground. And I plant a lot of those two crops, especially spinach. We plant an entire bed of spinach every winter. And so you can see here again this cutaway. This bed is where my peas were growing. They're done obviously for the year, and so we are going to plant this entire 12-foot bed in spinach. And then when the weather starts to cool off, we'll put a cold frame over the top of this and we'll be able to harvest from this bed all winter long and even into next spring. And so Spinach, especially for me, is one that I plant directly out into the ground. It doesn't transplant really well, and I want a lot of it because it's a good bulk crop that is going to give you a lot of produce in the fall and also through the winter, and then, you know, all the way to the spring. So spinach, get that in the ground if you absolutely possibly can. All right, so next let's talk about what we are going to be planting in containers. Again, because we have so much going on out in the garden right now and there's not a lot of space, we want to get fall crops going in areas where we wouldn't traditionally be growing crops, and containers make a great option for that. And these smart pots are awesome for planting in the fall. So again, thank you to Smart Pot for sponsoring this video and providing these containers. So they did give me these containers to try out this year. I've already got 3 of them growing and doing really well, and really impressed so far. I really like these. So made in the USA, they're BPA and lead free. These guys are like the original makers. They have the patent on fabric pots, and just a great, super product. I'm really liking it so far. So they have a broad range. This is the 10-gallon pot, and then this one here is a 15-gallon pot. I love the colors. They've got these vibrant colors. If you're not into these colors, this is a violet and this is an orange. They also have a blue, but if you're not into those colors, that's okay. They have normal blacks and grays and tans as well. So we thought we would get some of these vibrant colors that kind of will give some pop to our yard and a little bit extra here in the fall of color. So again, the 10-gallon and the 15-gallon pot, they have options all the way down to 1 gallon, all the way up literally to 1,000 gallons. So they've got pots that big as well. So all kinds of different pots to fit your needs. Great options. Again, great manufacturer. One of the things that I like the best about these pots is what we call air pruning. So if you notice, the inside of these containers is fuzzy, the outside is not. And that fuzziness is part of what causes the air pruning to happen. So the roots will grow out, and when they touch that fuzzy edge of the pot, it causes them to stop growing and do what we call air pruning. And so they stop growing outward, and instead then the roots will then start growing lateral roots. And that makes for a beefier, happier, overall better, stronger root system for your plants. And so that air pruning is really nice. The other nice thing is these containers help you to evenly distribute the water, the fertilizer, everything. They kind of act as a filter, keep all of the good stuff in and let the excess water out. And so just a great product. And I love these guys. And again, we're happy already with the plants that are happening there. I also like the fact that the handles are reinforced, especially on these bigger ones. They're extra reinforced. Hey guys, look at this. Let me see if I can get him to crawl on my hand. Sorry, we're gonna like totally go out and go weird here. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm gonna come close. Got a praying mantis that just landed here on our pot. So random little happening in the garden. Always happy to see praying mantis, and I'm gonna go put him right here so that he can go find somewhere to eat some aphids. Sorry, that was random, but couldn't pass up that opportunity. Okay, so what are we going to be planting in containers this fall? So I've got 6 containers that I am going to be using for my fall planting. And actually 7, I think, that we're going to be using. And today, I'm going to be planting just a few crops. Most of the containers that I'm going to be using will actually be putting some transplants out into. Things like kale and broccoli and things like that. And I'll do another video here in 2 or 3 weeks when it's actually time to put those transplants out. We'll talk more about that. But today we are going to, in this 15-gallon pot, we're going to be putting some carrots. So one thing that you want to think about when you're planting carrots in the fall is you want to look at some of the shorter maturing varieties. Instead of going for those longer ones, you want to choose shorter varieties. So varieties like Napoli or Scarlet Nantes, or in our case, we use a variety called Littlefinger. This is our favorite carrot, and we love these guys. And the reason why you want to choose a shorter carrot this time of year is because we're running out of sunlight, okay? So the maturity date on these is 60 days, but with the fall, they're going to be more like 75 days before they're mature. And by then, we're really starting to run out of sunlight. And so we want to make sure that we choose varieties that are smaller and are maturing faster so that we have time to get it all done. Okay, so we're going to plant some carrots today, and then we are also going to be planting in this container, we're going to be planting some lettuce, and we're going to plant butter crunch lettuce, which in this container we're going to actually just kind of do a mass planting. I'm not really concerned with having heads of butter crunch coming out of this container. Instead, is what I want is a big, just loaded container full of these dark green leafy vegetables. Okay, so we're going to be planting some of these as well. Okay, I'm also going to be doing in another bag that I haven't filled up yet, we're going to be trying some beets today, and so beets are another good option for containers in the fall. A few other things that we could be planting today, early August, in containers would be things like kale. We could be doing some Swiss chard. Any of the leafy greens could go in, any lettuces, anything like that would be really good in containers, and you could plant those directly by seed in the containers if you wanted, or you can do some transplants, either way. And like I say, we are going to be using some of the other pots that I have to actually put some transplants in, some kale, some broccoli, and a few things like that. So we will definitely be using these Smart Pots a lot. So again, thank you to Smart Pots for sponsoring this video and giving me this chance to try out their containers, which are awesome. Now, let's go talk a little bit about what we are going to be planting indoors so that we can transplant them out later in the garden. All right, so I moved inside here to my garage because I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the stuff that I'm going to be starting indoors right now that will then go outdoors here in somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. As my garden starts to clear out and the weather starts to cool, all of these different seedlings that I'm planting indoors right now will go outside, okay? Now, one nice thing about the fall is I'm not fighting for space in my seed starter. So I have, I'm not competing with my tomatoes and my peppers and my onions and all that kind of stuff. I can just plant lots of greens. And so I've got these little trays. I'm going to fill these guys up. I've got 10 or 12 of these trays, and we're going to have about 20, 25 plants in each one. And we're just going to go for it because we're going to have plenty of space in the fall garden as things start to clear out. And so we are just going to just pack it with lots of great, healthy, mostly leafy greens is what we're going to be planting today. Okay, so let's look at the list of things that I'm going to be planting inside. First off would be lettuce. And I know traditionally lettuce isn't really started indoors, but actually if you start it indoors, you're going to be super happy with the finished product. I've always loved the fact that when I start things indoors, the lettuce indoors, that I really get a nicer, better individual head, and things just go really well. So I'm going to be planting 3 different types of lettuces today. We're going to be planting some leaf lettuces, and my favorite varieties of leaf lettuce are black-seeded Simpson, and then a variety that we call Larry's Red, which is actually an heirloom variety that we have been saving seeds for years and years and years. So we're going to plant 2 varieties of leaf lettuce. Then we are going to be planting a what's kind of considered a romaine lettuce. It's called Paris Island Cos, and it's a nice, ribby, beefy, just super good lettuce that we plant, and that's my favorite romaine type lettuce to be planting. And so we're going to plant a whole tray full of those. And then our overall very favorite lettuce is called Butter Crunch, and we are going to plant about 20 of those plants as well. And all of those will go indoors. Now, what else are we going to plant? There's lots of things besides lettuce that we're going to be planting. We're also going to be doing a lot of kale this weekend. So we're going to do 3 different varieties of kale. Beets, which is a curly leaf kale. Then we're going to do Laciano, which is a dinosaur kale, or kind of that long crinkly kale. And then we're also going to be planting some red Russian kale. So we'll have 3 different types of kale that we'll be planting indoors. We are going to plant a little bit more Swiss chard because I've got a few spots that I want to have Swiss chard in that won't be specifically out in the garden. We're going to do some containers and a few things like that. And so we're going to plant some Swiss chard. We're also going to plant some collards indoors today. We're going to plant some Pac Choy or Bok Choy. Either way, it's sound. You'll hear it either way. Or we are also going to be planting some Mache. Okay, so Mache is something that not a lot of people are familiar with. Sometimes it's also called lamb's lettuce or corn salad as well. And Mache is a really, really good fall and winter crop. But in our area, because we have such hot, intense sun in August and early September, it doesn't germinate really well out in the garden. And so we are going to be planting some of that indoors that can then be transplanted out into the garden later. Okay, so everything again that we're planting here will probably sit under the seed starter for about 4 weeks, maybe as long as 6 weeks. And then we'll transplant that out into the garden, and it will do its kind of final maturing, and should be ready for us to eat all through October and November and even into early December. And then a lot of the things like the kale and the Mache will actually overwinter for us, and we'll be growing those in hoop houses all winter long. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to be growing indoors. Okay guys, hopefully this video was helpful for you, and that you will get out and get some fall and winter crops planted. And remember, everything that we talked about today can either go directly out in the garden if you have the space, or we can do containers and starting indoors as we kind of ran through those. So get out and get them planted, okay? All right, that is all I have for you for this week. Please make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click that notification bell so you get notice every time I release new videos. Also, make sure you go over and follow us on Instagram. We've got a lot of fun stuff happening there. And again, thanks to Smart Pots for sponsoring this video. One other reminder for you, make sure you check out the link down in the description below and learn a little bit more about the Gardening Academy. The Gardening Academy is our monthly membership service where you learn more about growing your own food by signing up and being part of our weekly content and everything that happens there. So really, really fun program. Got a lot of stuff going on there, so make sure you go click that description link as well, and learn more about the Gardening Academy, because we would love to have you there. Okay, I will talk to you guys next week. Everybody have a fantastic week. Happy gardening.